Welcome back to What's in the Bible, a first timer's journey. I'm not a theologian or a preacher. I'm just someone who's known God for a long time, but is only now getting to truly know His Word. Each day, I'm reading from the one-year Bible, starting in Genesis and going all the way through to Revelation. Old Testament, New Testament, Psalms, and Proverbs, all in one sitting. Today is day 6, and as always, I'm just here to read, reflect, and ask the honest questions that come up along the way. If you're new to this too, or even if you've read it before but want to see it with fresh eyes, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Day 6, Genesis 13:5, 15:21. Lot, who was traveling with Abram, had also become very wealthy with flocks of sheep and goats, herds of cattle, and many tents. But the land could not support both Abram and Lot with all their flocks and herds living so close together. So disputes broke out between the herdsmen of Abram and Lot. At that time, Canaanites and Perizzites were also living in the land. Finally, Abram said to Lot, "Let's not allow this conflict to come between us or our herdsmen. After all, we are close relatives. The whole countryside is open to you. Take your choice of any section of the land you want, and we will separate. If you want the land to the left, then I'll take the land on the right. If you prefer the land on the right, then I'll go to the left." Lot took a long look at the fertile lands of the Jordan Valley in the direction of Zor. The whole area was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord or the beautiful land of Egypt. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot chose for himself the whole Jordan Valley to the east of them. He went there with his flocks and servants and parted company with his uncle Abram. So Abram settled in the land of Canaan, and Lot moved his tents to a place near Sodom and settled among the cities of the plain. But the people of this area were extremely wicked and constantly sinned against the Lord. After Lot had gone, the Lord said to Abram, "Look as far as you can see in every direction, north and south, east and west. I am giving all this land as far as you can see to you and your descendants as a permanent possession. And I will give you so many descendants that, like the dust of the earth, they cannot be counted. Go and walk the land in every direction, for I am giving it to you." So Abram moved his camp to Hebron and settled near the oak grove belonging to Mamre. There he built another altar to the Lord. About this time, war broke out in the region. King Kedorlaomer of Elam and King Tidal of Goim fought against King Bera of Sodom, King Bersha of Gomorrah, King Shinab of Admah, King Shemeber of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, also called Zor. This second group of kings joined forces in Siddim Valley, that is, the Valley of the Dead Sea. For 12 years they had been subject to King Kedorlaomer, but in the 13th year they rebelled against him. 1 year later, Kedorlaomer and his allies arrived and defeated the Raphites at Eshtaroth Karnaim, the Zuzites at Ham, the Emites at Shaveh Kiriathaim, and the Horites at Mount Seir, as far as El Paran at the edge of the wilderness. Then they turned back and came to En Mishpath, now called Kadesh, and conquered all the territory of the Amalekites and also the Amorites living in Hazazon Tamar. Then the rebel kings of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Bela, also called Zor, prepared for battle in the valley of the Dead Sea. They fought against King Kedorlaomer, King Amraphel of Babylonia, and King Arioch of Elasar, 4 kings against 5. As it happened, the valley of the Dead Sea was filled with tar pits. And as the army of the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, some fell into the tar pits, while the rest escaped into the mountains. The victorious invaders then plundered Sodom and Gomorrah and headed for home, taking with them all the spoils of war and the food supplies. They also captured Lot, Abram's nephew who lived in Sodom, and carried off everything he owned. But one of Lot's men escaped and reported everything to Abram the Hebrew, who was living near the oak grove belonging to Mamre the Amorite. Mamre and his relatives, Eshcol and Aner, were Abram's allies. When Abram heard that his nephew Lot had been captured, he mobilized the 318 trained men who had been born into his household. Then he pursued Kedorlaomer's army until he caught up with them at Dan. There he divided his men and attacked during the night. Kedorlaomer's army fled, but Abram chased them as far as Hobeth. Abram recovered all the goods that had been taken, and he brought back his nephew Lot with his possessions and all the women and other captives. After Abram returned from his victory over Kedorlaomer and all his allies, the king of Sodom went out to meet him in the valley of Shaveh, that is, the king's valley. And Melchizedek, the king of Salem and a priest of God Most High, brought Abram some bread and wine. Melchizedek blessed Abram with this blessing: Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who has defeated your enemies for you. Then Abram gave Melchizedek a tenth of all the goods he had recovered. The king of Sodom said to Abram, Give back my people who were captured, but you may keep for yourself all the goods you have recovered. Abram replied to the king of Sodom, I solemnly swear to the Lord, God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, that I will not take so much as a single thread or sandal thong from what belongs to you. Otherwise, you might say, I am the one who made Abram rich. I will accept only what my young warriors have already eaten, and I request that you give a fair share of the goods to my allies, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre. Sometime later, the Lord spoke to Abram in a vision and said to him, Do not be afraid, Abram, for I will protect you, and your reward will be great. But Abram replied, O sovereign Lord, what good are all your blessings when I don't even have a son? Since you've given me no children, Eliezer of Damascus, a servant in my household, will inherit all my wealth. You have given me no descendants of my own, so one of my servants will be my heir. Then the Lord said to him, No, your servant will not be your heir. You will have a son of your own who will be your heir. Then the Lord took Abram outside and said to him, Look up into the sky and count the stars if you can. That's how many descendants you will have. And Abram believed the Lord, and the Lord counted him as righteous because of his faith. Then the Lord told him, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land as your possession. But Abram replied, O sovereign Lord, how can I be sure that I will actually possess it? The Lord told him, Bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. So Abram presented all these to him and killed them. Then he cut each animal down the middle and laid the halves side by side. He did not, however, cut the birds in half. Some vultures swooped down to eat the carcasses, but Abram chased them away. As the sun was going down, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a terrifying darkness came down over him. Then the Lord said to Abram, You can be sure that your descendants will be strangers in a foreign land, where they will be oppressed as slaves for 400 years. But I will punish the nation that enslaves them, and in the end they will come away with great wealth. As for you, you will die in peace and be buried at a ripe old age. After 4 generations, your descendants will return here to this land, for the sins of the Amorites do not yet warrant their destruction. After the sun went down and darkness fell, Abram saw a smoking firepot and a flaming torch pass between the calves of the carcasses. So the Lord made a covenant with Abram that day and said, I have given this land to your descendants all the way from the border of Egypt to the great Euphrates River, the land now occupied by the Kenites, Kenizzites, Cadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, Rephaites, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites, and Jebusites. Matthew 5:27-48. You have heard the commandment that says, You must not commit adultery. But I say, anyone who even looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So if your eye, even your good eye, causes you to lust, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your hand, even your stronger hand, causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. You have heard the law that says a man can divorce his wife by merely giving her a written notice of divorce. But I say that a man who divorces his wife, unless she has been unfaithful, causes her to commit adultery. And anyone who marries a divorced woman also commits adultery. You have also heard that our ancestors were told, You must not break your vows. You must carry out the vows you make to the Lord. But I say, do not make any vows. Do not say, by heaven, because heaven is God's throne. And do not say, by the earth, because the earth is his footstool. And do not say, by Jerusalem, for Jerusalem is the city of the great king. Do not even say, by my head, for you can't turn one hair white or black. Just say a simple yes, I will, or no, I won't. Anything beyond this is from the evil one. You have heard the law that says the punishment must match the injury, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say, do not resist an evil person. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, offer the other cheek also. If you are sued in court and your shirt is taken from you, give your coat too. If a soldier demands that you carry his gear for a mile, carry it 2 miles. Give to those who ask, and don't turn away from those who want to borrow. You have heard the law that says, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. In that way, you will be acting as true children of your Father in heaven. For he gives his sunlight to both the evil and the good. He sends rain on the just and the unjust alike. If you love only those who love you, what reward is there for that? Even corrupt tax collectors do that much. If you are kind only to your friends, how are you different from anyone else? Even pagans do that, but you are to be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. Psalm 6:1 through 10. Who can praise you from the grave? I am worn out from sobbing. All night I flood my bed with weeping, drenching it with my tears. My vision is blurred by grief. My eyes are worn out because of all my enemies. The Lord has heard my plea. The Lord will answer my prayer. May all my enemies be disgraced and terrified. May they suddenly turn back in shame. Proverbs 1:29 through 33. For they hated knowledge and chose not to fear the Lord. They rejected my, wisdom's, advice and paid no attention when I corrected them. Therefore, they must eat the bitter fruit of living their own way, choking on their own schemes. For simpletons turn away from me to death. Fools are destroyed by their own complacency. But all who listen to me will live in peace, untroubled by fear of harm. Now that we've read through today's passages, let's take a closer look at what they're really saying. Key themes from today's reading: Genesis 13:5 through 15:21, Abram and God's covenant. Abram and Lot separate. Tensions arise between Abram's and Lot's herdsmen due to limited land. Abram offers Lot the first choice of land, and Lot chooses the fertile Jordan Valley near Sodom. God's promise to Abram. After Lot leaves, God reaffirms his promise to Abram, showing him the vast land that will belong to his descendants. God's covenant with Abram. God promises Abram countless descendants despite his and Sarai's advanced age. Abram believes God and his faith is credited to him as righteousness. God seals his covenant with Abram through a symbolic ceremony promising land and blessings to his descendants. Matthew 5:27 through 48. Adultery and lust. Jesus intensifies the law by addressing the heart, not just outward actions, teaching that lust is as sinful as adultery. Divorce. Jesus emphasizes the sanctity of marriage, allowing divorce only in cases of sexual immorality. Oaths. Jesus calls for simple honesty, letting your yes mean yes and your no mean no. Love your enemies. Jesus teaches radical love, turning the other cheek, going the extra mile, and loving enemies. This reflects God's perfect love for all. Psalm 6:1 through 10, a cry for mercy. David expresses deep sorrow and seeks God's mercy and healing, both physically and spiritually. Key verse: The Lord has heard my cry for mercy. The Lord accepts my prayer. Psalm 6:9. Proverbs 129 through 33, Wisdom's consequences. Wisdom warns of the dangers of rejecting God's guidance. Those who ignore wisdom will face calamity, but those who listen will live in safety. Key verse: Whoever listens to me will live in safety and be at ease, without fear of harm. Proverbs 1:33. And like always, I've got a few questions. So now that we're under the new covenant with Jesus, do we still live by the Old Testament law that says an eye for an eye, or has that changed? Because people still quote that, especially when talking about things like capital punishment. Is that one of those phrases that gets taken out of context? So, yes, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth is one of the most quoted and misunderstood phrases in the Bible. People still throw it out today, especially in arguments about justice or capital punishment. But in its original context, it wasn't about revenge, it was about limiting revenge. It was part of Israel's civil law system, found in Exodus, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. The point was the punishment should match the crime, but not go beyond it. Fast forward to the New Testament, and Jesus totally reframes that idea. In Matthew 5, he says, "You've heard it said, eye for an eye, but I tell you, don't resist an evil person. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, offer the other cheek also." So, yes, that phrase often gets taken out of context today. Jesus isn't saying throw out justice, he's saying don't take justice into your own hands. As his followers, we're called to rise above retaliation and respond with mercy, humility, and forgiveness. Okay, but what about capital punishment? If Jesus tells us to forgive, should Christians be against the death penalty? Of course, this is a big question, and there's not just one simple answer. Some Christians say yes, we should be against it, because Jesus taught forgiveness even toward enemies. They point to verses like Romans 12, where Paul says, "Do not take revenge, leave room for God's wrath." But others say no, capital punishment is still allowed, just not by individuals. It's something governments may carry out to maintain justice, and they point to Romans 13, where it says authorities don't bear the sword in vain. So it comes down to this. As a follower of Jesus, you're personally called to live a life of mercy. As a society, there's room for debate about what justice looks like and how to carry it out wisely and fairly. Either way, the heart of Jesus' message is clear. Don't seek revenge. Seek peace. Seek redemption. And always remember, justice belongs to God first. So, if Jesus tells us as individuals to turn the other cheek and not retaliate, and governments are made up of people, then how do we justify capital punishment? Isn't that kind of a contradiction? The government isn't some soulless machine when it's made up of individuals. So, this question is one that gets to the heart of how Christians wrestle with justice, mercy, and the role of government. Here's the basic idea. In Romans 13, Paul makes a distinction between individual behavior and government authority. He says that followers of Jesus shouldn't seek personal revenge. That's Romans 12. But in the very next chapter, he says governments have been given authority by God to maintain justice and peace, even saying they bear the sword for a reason. So, yes, while the government is made up of people, it's acting in a different role as an institution of justice meant to serve the public good. It's not personal revenge, it's structured accountability. That's the biblical argument for capital punishment in some cases. But here's the tension: just because a government can do something doesn't always mean it should. That's why some Christians believe that in light of Jesus' teachings on mercy and forgiveness, even governments should move away from capital punishment. Others believe justice and mercy can still coexist, but it's a matter of how carefully that power is used. So, no, it's not a mechanical entity. Governments are people, but biblically, they're described as having a separate role from individuals to enforce justice, not out of revenge, but to preserve order. Now, let's take a moment to reflect on what all of this means in our own lives today. Reflection prompts from Genesis. Abram trusted God's promise, even when they seemed impossible. Are there areas in your life where God is asking you to trust Him, even when the outcome feels uncertain or far off? Abram willingly let Lot choose the better land. How can you practice selflessness and faith, trusting God to provide for you? In Matthew, Jesus emphasizes the importance of heart transformation, not just outward behavior. Are there areas in your life where you need to align your thoughts and intentions with God's will? Loving enemies is one of Jesus' most challenging teachings. Is there someone you find hard to love or forgive? How can you take steps towards showing them God's love? Psalm. David finds comfort in knowing that God hears his cries for help. What burden or sorrow can you bring to God today, trusting that he listens and cares? When you feel overwhelmed, how can you remind yourself of God's mercy and faithfulness? Proverbs. Wisdom offers safety and peace to those who listen. Are there areas in your life where you've ignored God's wisdom? How can you seek his guidance moving forward? Journaling ideas, trusting God's promises. Write about a promise of God that you are holding on to, even if it feels distant or uncertain. How can you strengthen your faith like Abram? Heart transformation. Reflect on a time when your intentions didn't align with your actions. What steps can you take to align your heart more closely with God's will? Crying out to God. Write a prayer like David's in Psalm 6, bringing your struggles, feels, and burdens to God and trusting his mercy. Reflect on a time when you followed God's wisdom and saw the benefits. How can you make seeking wisdom a daily habit? Actions for today. Practice selflessness. Look for an opportunity to let someone else choose the better land, like Abram did with Lot, trusting that God will provide for you. Align your heart. Take a moment to evaluate your thoughts and intentions today. Ask God to help you align them with His will, especially in areas like forgiveness or honesty. Show radical love. Choose one small act of kindness or forgiveness for someone you find difficult to love, following Jesus' teaching to love your enemies. Seek wisdom. Spend 5 to 10 minutes in quiet reflection, asking God for wisdom in a specific area where you need guidance. Key verse to meditate on. Matthew 5:44. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Thanks for joining me today on What's in the Bible, a first timer's journey. If today's reading brought up questions or even just made you pause and think, you're not alone. This journey is full of moments that challenge, stretch, and sometimes surprise us. Remember, every journey starts with a single step. See you tomorrow for the next one.